Paris, November 3rd, 1903, 08:15 a.m. A cold morning mist hangs over the Seine and newspapers are being stacked across the city. On the front page of Le Figaro, a surprising headline appears. A woman among the leading candidates for the Nobel Prize. For early 20th century Europe, this is not a simple announcement. It is a challenge to tradition, to hierarchy, to the very idea of who is allowed to make history in science. Her name is Marie Skłodowska-Curie. Born in 1867 in Warsaw, in a Poland suffocated under Russian rule, her childhood was shaped by two forces, oppression and knowledge. Books in Polish science circles were often forbidden, laboratories for women nearly non-existent. Yet Marie grew up surrounded by scientific curiosity. Her father, a physics instructor, taught her mathematics and physics in secret. Knowledge for her was not hobby, it was rebellion. Opportunity did not come easily. To support her family and save for a dream that felt almost mythical, studying in France, she worked as a governess. Every coin saved became a step toward liberation. After years of exhausting labor, she finally boarded a train and crossed Europe alone, arriving in Paris in 1891. She was thin, exhausted, and almost unknown. But she carried with her a determination sharper than steel. At the Sorbonne, she faced a new reality: poverty. She lived in freezing student rooms, often too cold to sleep unless she layered all her clothes. Money was scarce. Meals sometimes meant bread and tea, nothing more. She fainted once in class from hunger, and yet Marie thrived academically. She finished at the top of her physics class, then again in mathematics. Her professors took notice, not because she sought attention, but because her results made silence impossible. Science was her refuge, the laboratory was her world, and it was there, in the pursuit of pure knowledge, that she met Pierre Curie, a brilliant and gentle physicist, widely respected for his work in magnetism. Their connection was not theatrical romance, it was intellectual partnership. Both lived simply, both believed in science for truth, not fame. They married in 1895 and chose bicycles instead of a grand honeymoon, two researchers riding through the French countryside discussing physics and possibility. In 1896, a discovery changed their lives, though they did not yet know how deeply it would change the world. Henri Becquerel accidentally found that uranium emitted a mysterious energy on its own, without external power. It was invisible, constant, and unexplained. Most scientists glanced at the finding and moved on. But not Marie Curie. She saw a question no one else was asking. What else could emit such energy? And what did it mean for our understanding of matter? She began systematic investigation. It was not glamorous work. It was slow, repetitive, physically demanding science. She crushed ores, stirred chemical solutions, measured tiny electrical currents. And soon she found something extraordinary. Certain minerals emitted even stronger radiation than pure uranium. There had to be unknown elements hidden inside them. Months of analysis followed. Not in a polished lab, but in a damp shed once used as a medical school morgue. Tools were borrowed. Air was bitter cold in winter, suffocating in summer. The ceiling leaked. But science does not require comfort, only truth and perseverance. In 1898, she announced her first major breakthrough, the discovery of polonium, named after her beloved Poland. Later that year, she and Pierre identified a second new element, radium. Unlike anything previously known, radium glowed in the dark and released energy continuously, as if it carried fire trapped inside matter itself. The scientific world shook. A woman, a foreign woman, had expanded the periodic table and opened a door to a new understanding of the atom. By 1903, the Curie's work reached global recognition. Their research demonstrated that atoms were not indivisible as once thought, but dynamic, capable of releasing powerful energy. This would become the foundation of nuclear physics, medical radiology, and entire future technologies. But at this moment, recognition came reluctantly. Some members of the Nobel Committee attempted to remove Marie's name, suggesting only Pierre should be honored. He refused. If they recognized him, they would recognize her. Finally, both received the Nobel Prize in Physics. With Henri Becquerel, a woman had reached the highest seat of science. The throne, once unchallenged, was shaken, yet for Marie, the prize was not triumph. It was responsibility. Her purpose remained unchanged, to understand nature and use that knowledge for humanity. Newspapers debated her merit, societies whispered about gender roles, but inside her laboratory, equations, samples, and instruments waited. The world had opinions. Marie had work. Today, her story is often romanticized, but the truth is stronger. She fought systemic exclusion, financial struggle, loneliness, and scientific skepticism, not through anger or drama, but through quiet endurance and excellence. No speeches, no grand claims, just discipline, method, and truth. As we explore her journey across these 5 parts, we step into a moment in history where one woman's commitment forced science to reconsider its boundaries. Not through rebellion of words, but through rebellion of discovery. If you're here because stories of real courage inspire you, then like and subscribe, not for entertainment, but to support content that honors truth, knowledge, and history. If Marie Curie could challenge a world that doubted her, what challenge in your life can you confront with the same quiet strength? By 1910, Marie Curie stood as one of the most respected scientists in the world, but also one of the most vulnerable. Pierre was gone, the laboratory felt emptier, and the weight of her responsibilities seemed heavier each year. Yet she pushed forward with precision. Her research on radioactivity expanded, her measurements became more refined, and her influence across physics and chemistry deepened. In that year, she accomplished something extraordinary. She successfully isolated pure metallic radium, a feat that required years of chemical processing and intense calculation. This breakthrough placed Curie at the absolute frontier of atomic science. Newspapers praised the achievement, universities cited her work, and young scientists sought to join her laboratory. It was a moment of triumph, built not through speeches or glory, but through patience, mathematics, and discipline bordering on sacrifice. But while science recognized her, society was less forgiving. France at the time still viewed strong, independent women with suspicion. When Pierre died, she had been left alone in a world that did not believe women belonged in positions of intellectual authority, and in 1911, public opinion turned violently against her. The crisis began not in a laboratory, but in a private life. Marie formed a friendship, and later a relationship, with Paul Langevin, a fellow physicist and friend of Pierre. Langevin, however, was married, and though separated from his wife, the situation was complex. Private letters were stolen from Marie's home and leaked to the press. Overnight, newspapers shifted from praising her genius to attacking her character. Headlines mocked her as a foreigner, a woman without morals, a threat to French values. Crowds gathered outside her home. Stones were thrown at her windows. Academics who once applauded her work went silent, unwilling to risk reputation by standing beside her. She was not only a woman in a male-dominated world, she was now a target in a scandal. And just as public fury reached its peak, a letter arrived from Stockholm. Marie Curie had been selected to receive her second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for her work on radium and polonium. She became the first person, man or woman, to win 2 Nobel Prizes in different scientific fields. It was a scientific milestone, yet the pressure surrounding her was so intense that the Nobel Committee quietly encouraged her not to attend the ceremony. They hoped to avoid controversy. Marie refused. With calm determination, she travelled to Stockholm and accepted the prize. She spoke not of scandal or society, but of science, evidence, and the importance of truth. Her dignity in the face of hostility demonstrated a principle she lived by. Public opinion could shift like weather, but scientific truth remained constant. Her work continued. She took control of Pierre's laboratory and trained the next generation of physicists. Her daughter, Irene, grew up in that environment, surrounded by instruments and equations, eventually becoming a Nobel laureate herself. Meanwhile, Marie pressed forward in her research, studying radiation with unwavering precision. Yet each experiment had a price. The technology of the time offered almost no protection. She handled radioactive materials directly, unaware of the long-term biological consequences. Burns appeared on her skin. She carried glass vials of radium in her pocket, fascinated by their blue glow in the dark. She viewed the light as beauty. The world would later understand it as danger. Her notebooks from this era remain radioactive a century later. Her body silently absorbed radiation daily. She never slowed. Outside the lab, global tensions rose. Europe marched toward conflict, ideologies hardened, borders tightened. And when World War I erupted in 1914, Marie Curie made a decision that once again prioritized humanity over personal comfort or recognition. She organized mobile radiography units, later known as Little Curies, allowing battlefield surgeons to locate bullets and fractures inside wounded soldiers. She trained nurses, taught doctors, and drove trucks filled with equipment to the front lines. She was not chasing prestige, she was saving lives. By war's end, over 1 million soldiers had benefited from her X-ray units. Despite this humanitarian contribution, her critics remained. Nobel Prizes did not shield her from prejudice. Institutions still excluded her, and French academies resisted admitting her solely because she was a woman. But history was already being written, and her work, steady, patient, relentless, was carving a path no institution could block forever. Her resolve in this period reveals her character. She did not seek permission to exist in science, nor did she apologize for ambition. She simply proven, again and again, that excellence forces recognition, even when society resists. And while the public remembered scandal, the scientific world moved with her discoveries. Atomic theory entered a new era. Quantum physics emerged. Ernest Rutherford split the atom. Albert Einstein praised her intellect publicly, refusing to entertain gossip. Marie Curie's story in these years is not about drama. It is about endurance. She carried responsibility without complaint, faced hostility without retreat, and chose truth over applause. Her strength was not loud, it was disciplined. If you're watching this and you believe more people should hear real stories of resilience and achievement, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Not for entertainment, but to support content that respects truth and history. If one person, under pressure, loss, and public judgment, could still pursue knowledge with integrity, what excuse do we have to stop when the world challenges us? Today, more than a century after her first groundbreaking experiments, the story of Marie Curie is often reduced to neat sentences. First woman to win a Nobel Prize, first person to win two, pioneer of radioactivity. These are true, yet they barely capture the reality of her impact. Her legacy is not measured in headlines or medals. It is measured in laboratories, hospitals, and scientific principles that still guide the world. Look at modern medicine. Radiation therapy treats millions of cancer patients each year. Imaging technologies trace fractures, tumors, and infections deep inside the body. Nuclear medicine helps diagnose illnesses with precision unthinkable in her time. Every one of these tools traces back to the quiet perseverance of a scientist who refused to abandon an idea simply because others dismissed it. In physics and chemistry, her influence is even broader. The concept of radioactive decay became the foundation of nuclear physics. It altered our understanding of energy, matter, and the structure of the atom. Subsequent breakthroughs, from the splitting of the atom to the development of nuclear reactors and particle accelerators, all build on principles she helped establish. The 20th century, defined by atomic science and nuclear technology, rests in part on her equations and her willingness to challenge assumptions. Yet what makes Curie's story remarkable is not only the science, it is the method. She pursued truth quietly, rigorously, and without theatrics. She never branded herself as a revolutionary. She simply performed rigorous work until the world could not look away. She did not fight her critics with speeches or manifestos. She outlasted them through accuracy, resilience, and consistency. She trained scientists, built institutions, and created systems that continued long after her death. She raised a daughter who earned a Nobel Prize, demonstrating that talent and discipline are not accidents. They are transmitted through example. Her laboratory became a model for future research centers. Collaborative, international, focused on evidence over ego. The notebook she kept, still radioactive, symbolizes her legacy perfectly. Knowledge so powerful, it remains active long after she is gone. It also represents the risks she accepted without complaint. Science, for her, was never comfortable. It was work. It was responsibility. It was duty. And she bore that responsibility without expecting applause. Her character was not shaped by privilege or ease. She came from political oppression in Poland, overcame financial hardship in Paris, broke academic barriers without seeking permission, and continued working through grief, illness, and public hostility. She rejected celebrity and resisted the idea that genius needed spectacle. Her life demonstrated a principle often forgotten in the modern era. Achievement built slowly through discipline and quiet sacrifice lasts longest. While some pioneers sought attention, fame, or recognition, Marie Curie sought accuracy. When others worried about reputation, she worried about measurement error. When critics tried to define her, she focused on data. The scientific world admired her not because she demanded respect, but because she made respect the logical outcome of her work. Many people today see success as a moment, a viral story, a sudden spotlight. Curie's life teaches a different truth. Real success is cumulative. It forms over years, through hours of unseen labor, corrections, failures, and persistence. She did not chase prestige. Prestige accumulated around her slowly and inevitably because she never compromised standards. Her story continues to inspire not only scientists, but anyone facing adversity with purpose. Women entering STEM fields see in her not a symbol, but a pathway. Immigrants and outsiders find in her story proof that excellence crosses borders. Researchers facing slow, uncertain results find reassurance in her patience, and every person facing doubt or resistance can see in her life an answer. Perseverance grounded in truth reshapes the world. When France finally carried her remains to the Pantheon in 1995 with full honors, the gesture was symbolic. But symbolism was never what defined her. Her honor existed long before any ceremony. She did not need marble walls to validate her contribution. Her proof lived in equations, instruments, and transformed reality. Marie Curie did not simply shake the throne of science, as some say. She changed what the throne meant. Before her, scientific authority rested on tradition, hierarchy, and gender. After her, authority belonged more clearly to evidence, method, and results. She did not overthrow the system. She outgrew it so completely that the system had to adjust. Even today, her influence echoes in every scientific grant proposal emphasizing method, every ethics discussion around research responsibility, and every young researcher choosing curiosity over comfort. Her life did not ask the world to admire her. It asked the world to grow. She once said, "One never notices what has been done. One can only see what remains to be done." These words remain relevant, reminding us that progress is never finished, and that humility stands at the center of true knowledge. Curie did not want followers. She wanted thinkers. She did not wish to be placed on a pedestal. She wanted others to climb onto the platform she built and go further. And that may be her greatest achievement. She created a future where others could surpass her. That is the highest form of legacy, not a monument, but momentum. Science remembers her not because she asked it to, but because it must. History respects her not because she demanded it, but because truth obliges it. And every advancement in atomic science, medical imaging, or radiation therapy carries a trace of her presence, not as a dramatic symbol, but as a precise foundation. Marie Curie did not just make discoveries, she made standards. If one life lived quietly, with discipline and purpose, can alter the course of science and medicine for generations, what long-term impact are you willing to build, even if no one applauds today? Part 4. War, Legacy, and the Weight of Radiation. The guns of World War I had barely fallen silent when Marie Curie returned to a laboratory scarred by war, yet filled with possibility. Europe was exhausted, hopeful, and unstable. Nations rebuilt, borders shifted, and scientific institutions scrambled for relevance in a world transformed by technology and destruction. Curie, already a pioneer, now found herself at the center of a new era, one in which science would increasingly define global power. Her wartime radiology units had saved thousands of lives. She had driven through trenches, stood beside surgeons, and worked directly with wounded soldiers. But once peace returned, she did not seek political reward or public honors. Instead, she focused again on research. For her, war was an interruption, necessary work, but still a pause in her true mission, understanding radiation, isolating elements, and training future scientists. Her laboratory in Paris became a hub of international cooperation. Students arrived from across Europe, America, and Asia. She welcomed researchers regardless of nationality, gender, or background. Science, she believed, should serve humanity, not national ego. She argued for peaceful scientific collaboration long before global scientific networks existed. Her lectures were precise, demanding, and known for clarity without theatrics. To her students, the pursuit of truth required discipline and humility. In 1920, she traveled to the United States to secure funding for radium research, as France still lacked sufficient financial support for advanced equipment. She delivered lectures, met with academics, and addressed women's scientific associations. American journalist Marie Mattingly Melanie, recognizing Curie's influence, helped organize donations. The campaign succeeded, and Curie returned to France with a precious gram of radium, a gift from American women who saw her as a symbol of possibility and progress. Yet while her scientific reputation grew stronger, her health weakened. She had spent decades handling radium without proper shielding, absorbing radiation through her skin and lungs. Laboratory notebooks, equipment, and even furniture from her lab remain radioactive today, measured in libraries with Geiger counters sealed in lead containers. But at the time, radiation was seen as almost magical. Radium appeared in beauty creams, medicines, and even children's toys. The dangers were not fully understood, and Curie, though cautious by instinct, could not foresee the long-term biological effects. Despite growing fatigue and vision problems, she continued working. When colleagues suggested rest, she answered with data. When journalists asked about fear or regret, she responded with principle. I never see what has been done, I only see what remains to be done. Her second daughter, Eve Curie, became a journalist and diplomat, while her first, Irene Joliot-Curie, followed her into science. Together with her husband, Frédéric Joliot, Irene expanded on her mother's work, discovering artificial radioactivity and earning a Nobel Prize of her own. Scientific excellence, discipline, and service had become a family tradition. International recognition continued, but so did barriers. Curie remained outside the French Academy of Sciences, rejected twice solely because she was a woman. When asked about the exclusion, she refused bitterness. Scientific truth was not a title, a seat in a chamber, or applause. Her legacy would not be decided by institutions. It was already written in laboratories across the world. Throughout the 1920s, she traveled widely, attended conferences, and argued for global standards in radiology and safety, even as her own health quietly deteriorated from decades of exposure. She believed radiation would revolutionize medicine, industry, and scientific understanding. She also knew, long before most, that it required caution. Her approach remained consistent. No melodrama, no nationalism, no mythology. She worked, measured, calculated, corrected, improved, and shared. Her days were dedicated to rigor, her nights often to fatigue, yet she refused to slow down. Curie never viewed her achievements as personal monuments. They were stepping stones toward a deeper understanding of nature. In 1934, Marie Curie died from aplastic anemia, a condition linked to long-term radiation exposure. The world mourned, but her own words guided the tone of remembrance, measured, dignified, focused on science and service rather than tragedy. She was buried with Pierre, not in grand marble halls, but in quiet soil. 60 years later, her remains were moved to the Pantheon in Paris, alongside the great figures of French history. The first woman granted the honor for her own achievements. Her legacy extended beyond research. She transformed the role of women in science. She proved that excellence breaks barriers even when institutions resist. She showed that the pursuit of truth demands patience, humility, and resilience. And she demonstrated that the real power of science lies not in prestige, but in service to humanity. Her laboratory continued, her students became leaders, and her discoveries fueled both healing and new scientific revolutions. The modern fields of nuclear medicine, radiology, and atomic physics trace their origins directly to her equations, her measurements, and her persistence. Even now, more than a century later, hospitals use methods derived from her work to diagnose disease and save lives. Her influence is not symbolic. It is practical, measurable, and ongoing. In the quiet of her notebooks and the precision of her data, a message remains. Real change rarely happens through theatrical moments. It happens through consistent effort, discipline, and a refusal to stop when conditions are difficult, when the world misjudges, or when recognition lags behind truth. Marie Curie did not demand honor, she earned it, and in doing so, she reshaped the world. If the foundation of progress is patience, discipline, and unwavering purpose, what long-term goal in your life deserves the same steady commitment? By the year 1904, Marie Curie's name had entered the global scientific community, yet her life remained far from comfort or prestige. After winning the Nobel Prize, many would expect fame, luxury, and an easy path forward. But for Marie and Pierre, nothing truly changed. Their laboratory was still a drafty shed with cracked walls and uneven floors. Radium samples sat in simple glass jars. Instruments were improvised. The work did not pause, because for the Curies, discovery was not a destination. It was a duty. The world celebrated them, but only in headlines. In academic halls and newspapers, admiration mixed with skepticism and resentment. Some respected her brilliance. Others whispered that Pierre was the true genius. In elite salons, men debated whether a woman could understand atomic theory. Marie worked through the noise. Her world was not gossip. It was equations, measurements, and experiments. The science she had begun was evolving rapidly. The radiation that she and Pierre studied did not behave like conventional energy. It could penetrate bodies, burn skin, and alter living tissue. It defied Newtonian rules, and hinted at profound secrets locked within matter itself. Every new measurement challenged the foundations of chemistry and physics. At universities, students were learning that matter was solid and stable. But in Marie's shed, matter was proving unstable, dynamic, and alive with invisible power. Medical professionals soon realized something extraordinary. Radiation could kill cancer cells. Hospitals began experimenting with radium to treat tumors. Patients traveled across Europe seeking what newspapers called miracle rays. Physicians wrote letters to the Curies, asking for guidance and material. Marie answered many herself by hand, often late at night. There was no industry yet, no patent system for radioactivity. She and Pierre made a controversial choice. They refused to patent their discovery. They believed science belonged to humanity, not to shareholders. This decision would later be seen as both noble and costly. While companies and institutions profited from radioactivity, the Curies earned nothing from its commercialization. Their income remained modest, but their principle was simple. Knowledge, once revealed, should serve everyone. Despite mounting success, the physical toll of the work grew visible. Marie handled tons of pitchblende ore, boiling it down in huge pots, stirring thick black residues, inhaling toxic fumes. She filtered, evaporated, recalculated, and refined again and again. Her fingertips cracked from chemicals, her clothes absorbed radiation. But she pressed forward, convinced the world stood at the beginning of a new scientific era. She was right. Across Europe and America, laboratories began investigating atomic behavior, every discovery traced back to her papers. Yet few fully understood the scope of her achievement. She had not simply discovered new elements. She had demonstrated that atoms can spontaneously release energy, a concept that would redefine the 20th century, fueling medical breakthroughs, industrial advances, and ultimately nuclear technology. But progress rarely comes alone. As Marie's reputation grew, so did pressure. Invitations filled her mail. Universities asked her to lecture. Scientific academies offered membership. But some hesitated, unwilling to grant full recognition to a woman. Pierre, increasingly aware of the strain, took on more responsibilities at the Sorbonne to protect her research time. They shared every problem, every calculation, every doubt. Their partnership was not dramatic. It was methodical, built on discipline and shared purpose. In 1906, tragedy struck. Pierre Curie, while crossing a Paris street in the rain, slipped and fell under the wheels of a horse-drawn carriage. He died instantly. News spread rapidly. Scientists around the world mourned. But for Marie, the loss was deeper than public grief could express. She had lost her husband, her partner in science, her greatest supporter. Many expected her to disappear from scientific life, overwhelmed by sorrow and responsibilities as a mother of two. Instead, she returned to the laboratory. Days after Pierre's funeral, she took his place at the Sorbonne, becoming the first woman to teach there. Her first lecture began not with flowers or ceremony, but with unfinished equations and the continuation of their research. Students entered the room expecting emotion. They found rigor. She picked up where Pierre had stopped, as if he had stepped out only for a moment. Scientific truth, she believed, could not pause for grief. The years following were defined by quiet resilience. She continued studying radium's properties, refining extraction techniques, mentoring younger scientists, and raising her daughters. Radium remained difficult to produce and extremely valuable. At one point, gram for gram, more expensive than diamonds, yet Marie still refused to patent it. Her notebooks from this period, filled with meticulous data, are still radioactive today. They rest in lead boxes, requiring protective gear to consult, a physical reminder of her dedication and the unseen danger she accepted for the progress of knowledge. Society was changing slowly. Women began entering scientific programs in greater numbers, inspired by her example. Governments funded research into radiation therapy. Atomic theory evolved toward quantum mechanics. The scientific world was moving into the modern age, and Marie Curie had been the catalyst. Still, she never forgot where she came from. She supported Polish scientific institutions, encouraged international collaboration, and continued believing that truth should transcend borders and ego. She did not seek fame, and yet she became a symbol, not of dramatized rebellion, but of quiet revolution through excellence. Her story in these years is not defined by dramatic speeches or dramatic gestures. It is defined by endurance, precision, and unshakable commitment to reality. Knowledge, for her, was not glory. It was responsibility. As the first decade of the 20th century closed, she stood as the most influential female scientist on Earth and one of the most important scientists, period. But her journey was far from over. Ahead lay controversy, triumph, and more discovery. And through it all, she would continue the work, not for praise, but for truth. If progress demands sacrifice and resilience, what are you willing to pursue in your life, even when comfort and certainty disappear?